Pleasant greetings, everyone. So we're going to discuss the chapter 8, or financing the venture. A new business project need not have substantial startup capital requirement, nor does one have to be a millionaire to start an entrepreneurial business endeavor. Neither a building nor a fully furnished office be made a requisite to be able to open the business. In fact, many entrepreneurs have commenced their businesses out of a shoestring capital or with little amount as what is in their savings account. Others literally do not have money or capital, but have good business ideas in the guts, as well as courage to start the business using someone else's money. If one has good idea worth pursuing in a business and the person concerned has all that entrepreneurial traits, the problem should not be much of a capital or money burden per se, but on more finding or sourcing the capital, and this chapter will be all about that. It will teach us how to finance our future businesses. So we have here the capital requirements. From an entrepreneur's viewpoint, capital is not all about or does not necessarily mean money. In fact, some entrepreneurs consider idea or an innovative idea as a form of a capital that is much more precious than money. From financial viewpoint, however, capital comes in monetary terms and in three forms as follows. First, we have here the fixed capital. The fixed capital refers to the money needed to purchase fixed assets or capital goods. This includes amounts meant for the acquisition of machinery, buildings, office equipment, and all those fixed assets or the items needed in the provisions of services to the customer. Second is the working capital. After putting up the business with all the basic amenities and capital items in place as preparation for operationalizing the business, the other capital requirements, which refers to the working capital, is needed to fund the day-to-day operations of the business. Working capital represents the money or hard cash to support its normal short-term operations. It is generally used for inventory, payroll, utilities, and stock inventory, and also for to take care of the unexpected emergencies, as well as to keep the business on an ongoing concern, or sa accounting pa gitawag ni siya mga expenses or operating expenses. Next, we have the growth capital. Unlike working capital, growth capital is not related to daily or seasonal requirements for funds of the business. Instead, growth capital requirements are needed when an existing business is set to expand, diversify, or change its directions, or example na may brand sa Magbolo, so magbutan po kag another brand sa usa ka lugar, so you need there a growth capital. After going through the rigors of preparing the business plan, the search for capital is the next challenge or headache that the entrepreneur shall be bothered with. In case he himself does not have the personal capital to fund the business, in searching for capital to launch a company, an entrepreneur faces most of the same issues that small businesses owners does in looking into expanding an existing business. So, in broad terms, funds needed for the business can be generated either internally or externally. Internal funds resources generally refers to the funds which are owned by the entrepreneur himself or the company, whereas external capital essentially refers to those beyond the means of the entrepreneur and the company, or those external to the entrepreneur or to the business organization. And we also have here the formal or informal sources. Fund sources could be obtained from formal or informal sources. By formal sources, it means sourcing or borrowing funds from organizations or institutions duly authorized by government or by law to extend financial assistance or other forms of support services to business and industry. They include banks, both private and commercial banks and government-owned or controlled financial institutions, investment houses, lending investors, mortgage bank, pawn shops, credit card companies, and others. Informal sources, on the other hand, include those fund sources other than formal sources mandated by law to provide capital or financing to business organizations. This group includes the entrepreneur's parents, brothers and sisters, relatives, friends, suppliers, and other fund providers outside of the financial system. Now we have here the owner's equity. In a corporation, the contribution of the owner to the capital of the business is called equity and is evidenced by the issuance of stockholders' certificate issued by the corporation. It is also oftentimes referred to as the ownership in the corporation, and the holders of stock certificates are called stockholders. The stockholding represents a percentage of voting rights or control of the stockholder in the corporation. A holder of common stock possesses voting rights and controlling power at the same time. Assuming all forms of risk inherent to the investments in the company, unlike the other holder of a common stock, a holder of a preferred stock does not have the voting rights and other privilege similarly accorded to a common stockholders, and does not assume all the risk of the business. Instead, preferred stockholders are guaranteed a fixed return to the investment regardless of the operational outcome of the business. So we have here the long-term borrowings. Long-term as well as medium-term creditors refer to organizations whose main businesses are generally meant for providing such form of financial assistance. Generally, they include banks and mortgage houses that provide funds or capital whose payments are made on a long-term basis, say 1 to 3 years and 3 years or more. So these fund sources take the form of the following. So we have first the mortgage. A mortgage takes the form of fund generation by way of pledging a designated property as security or collateral for the loan. If the need arises, the company can mortgage its equipment or real estate property to the bank, a mortgage organization like a pawn shop, or by way of special arrangement with an individual who is in position to help an entrepreneur in dire needs of funds. Next, we have here the bonds. These are forms of indebtedness of the issuing company that promises a fixed amount of interest to the bondholders upon maturity or call by its holders. Companies and businesses organizations with good track record in the industry can arrange for an issuance of bond certificate. Like stocks in the corporation, issuing bonds requires approval from the Securities and Exchange Commission and traded in the stock market, or it may necessitate a third party to handle the bond flotation. Bonds generally carry a fixed investment or holding period of at least 1 year, running to 2 to 5 years or even more, depending on the terms of the bond issued. Next, we have the long-term commercial papers. LCPs are commercial documents issued by large companies with credible track records. Like bonds, LCPs carry a fixed return promised by issuer, and hence, LCP holders are guaranteed returns by buying the LCP. Regardless of the operational outcome of the business of the issuer, issuing LCPs also requires clearance and approval of the Securities and Exchange Commission and may be traded just like the shares of stocks. Third parties are usually involved in issuance of LCPs, and like the bonds, it carries a minimum holding period and bears a fixed interest rate, thus guaranteeing returns to LCP holders. Like bonds, LCPs do not carry ownership or controlling rights and voting privileges, but are given preference in settlement in case of the issuing company. Now we have here the short-term creditors. Short-term creditors take the form of financiers on a short-term basis lasting to 1 year or less. In some cases, they include fund providers who may not demand voluminous documents like business plans or feasibility studies. These creditors can serve as a standby credit facility to the entrepreneurs, which can be tapped as needed. When properly nurtured, short-term creditors can be tapped for cash needs or inventory, even by simply using the phone or a brief visit to its offices to sign some papers. These types of creditors are briefly described as first, commercial banks. As its charter provides, commercial banks are duty bound to provide both short term and long term financing to any viable business project. While banks prefer loans and financing on a medium or long term basis, there are special financing packaging involved short term financing for periods of 6 months or even less. For an export oriented business, entrepreneurs should explore special financing package normally offered by export banks or those that are specifically mandated by the government. Export banks are authorized to offer attractive credit terms to domestic manufacturers and foreign buyers of their goods. Next, we have the merchandise suppliers. The company's inventory or stock can be procured either through cash or credit terms. Entrepreneurs that can stock their shelves with items procured on credit terms are not only daring but smart entrepreneurs as well. Credit terms with the merchandise suppliers being a form of financing should be explored to the fullest with the merchandise suppliers. Terms like consignment basis, layaway plans, and similar arrangements can be made with the suppliers. This will spare the entrepreneurs hard cash that can be used for some other purposes or simply deposited in the bank or invested in high-yielding instruments. Depending on the quality of relationship between the company and the merchandise suppliers, some suppliers provide such terms as pay when able or payment terms up to 120 days. New business ventures are also prospective business partners of merchandise suppliers, and they can be the best of friends on a long-term basis. Such relationship can be nurtured such that suppliers can provide short-term capital in terms of credit privileges for the raw materials and production inputs that are needed by the entrepreneur. Next, we have the credit card companies. Credit card is the most convenient yet the most expensive loan terms you can find in town. Credit cards are actually one of the most overlooked avenues in obtaining startup capital. Though it offers treatment term loans, it would appear as cheap because one does not need to have business plan or collateral to get the amount needed. All that is needed by a credit card bearing entrepreneur is to walk to the ATM machine and withdraw the amount needed. If the entrepreneur is only looking at home-based business that generally needs lesser capital, the amount can be easily raised if you have several cards. Or a group of 5 or more persons forming corporation can easily combine their credit card limit and instantly start the business using the credit card. For instance, a group of 5 investors holding a Citibank Visa card or MasterCard with a 50,000 credit limit each can instantly raise 75,000 cash in a matter or minutes, which is more than enough for a small business. Or they can put up a corporation with 1 million authorized capitalization with fully paid up stock portion under the minimum requirements as mandated by law. The option to tap credit card should be made with prudence and extreme precautions, or at least resort, because most credit card companies charge extremely high, if not exorbitant rates. Next, the capital equipment suppliers. In their desire to sell equipment, suppliers will often make every favorable term available even to new companies. This is possible because the equipment itself secures the loan. The contract may be a lease held by the seller or a leasing company, or conditional sales agreement, whereby the seller retains ownership or title until the last installment payment is made and received. Next, leasing companies. They make possible the procurement of capital items or equipment for the company. This arrangement, however, can work the other way around if the entrepreneur holds the design of the capital equipment. In such a case, capital equipment suppliers can make it possible for entrepreneurs to buy the equipment, especially if it is a custom designed, one of a kind equipment. Next, receivable factors. There are many specialized organizations like credit and collection companies or even individuals who take the risk of buying receivables at discounted rates. By selling the receivables, the entrepreneur is relieved of the delay and cost of collection efforts at the same time generate funds needed by the business. And lastly, we have the deferral of payments in general. When the economy is in a difficult situation or there are industry or region-wide financial crisis or when the money position of the company is tight, most companies lag behind in repayment of bills and loans. Entrepreneurs should not be afraid or ashamed to negotiate of payment of bills and loans by not necessarily or immediately going into restructuring arrangement. Moreover, entrepreneurs should not overlook the fact in financial crisis periods, some of the employees might be willing to defer portions of their salary or other benefits either as a gesture of solidarity, loyalty, fellowship, or practical measures to avoid being laid off. Now we have here venture capital companies. Venture capital companies refer to private and for profit organizations that provide funds to new business ventures by way of purchasing equity positions in new or young businesses believed to have potentials to produce maximum returns within short period of time. Like all financiers, venture capital corporations or venture capitalists are interested in the financial track record of the company in case it is an old one or the profit potentials in case of new venture. More importantly, however, is that venture capital organizations are more concerned with the future profit potentials the business investments offers. As a result, venture capital companies invest funds in returns for the share of ownership or a certain degree of control in business operations. Unlike banks that are more concerned with the payments of the loan amount borrowed other than the immediate return of investments, some venture capital companies do seek foothold trying to develop long-term capital gains. Venture capital companies hope to make an attractive profit when they sell their equity at any time they feel necessary.
So, hello everyone, I am Dino Liberdilla and I will be explaining other sources. So, other than the aforementioned sources by Lee, so there are other fund sources, some of which are in fact more advantageous to prospective entrepreneurs. No? These sources include the following. So, makita nato diyan, no? Lending investors, government institutions, non-government organizations, NGOs, political sources, friends and relatives, so included na sila sa purchase order financing, employees, and even usurers. So the first one is lending investors. So these are small business organizations duly licensed by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas to provide quick financing, less paperwork as compared to commercial lending sources like the banks. So these organizations generally conduct a one-time credit investigation, including visits. So these organizations generally conduct a one-time credit investigation. These organizations generally conduct a one-time credit investigation, including visits to the entrepreneur's residence and actual site of business. So after which, a standing credit limit is approved or considered set as a standing credit limit. So entrepreneurs' need for fund is satisfied by simply filling up application forms or contract, and after that, cash is delivered right on the spot. So mas dali gid siya compared sa kanang uban nga fund sources. So next is government institutions. So government institutions, these are special government financing packages meant for entrepreneurs in need of funds and seed capital or assistance to those in dire need of funds like victims of calamities or highly entrepreneurial individuals. So all that is needed here are endorsement by barangay officials or other forms of documentations. Sometimes including submissions of project studies. So, through its various agencies and instrumentalities, the government has a number of financing programs for small and medium scale enterprises. Next is the non-government organizations, NGOs. So there are non-government organizations whose mandates or major programs are really meant for upcoming small-scale entrepreneurs and providing financial assistance to the underprivileged. So these NGOs charge lesser interest rates and with more noble intentions as compared to commercial loan providers. So what are example of these NGOs? Examples are Tulay sa Pag-unlad, Hyper Project International, kadungog na ba mo na? Plan International, and many more NGOs, no? Gahuwat ra gyud na sila. And next is political sources. So relationships with politicians can go a very long way. So some politicians are philanthropists and are therefore in a position to provide or grants a financial assistance for self-employment and livelihood projects. So without bothering to pay later, or these politicians are real entrepreneurs themselves who has capital and resources or means to broker business deals that can lead to big ticket projects. So next is friends and relatives. So friends and relatives, so they are abound or just around willing to be tapped, no? Gahuwat ra gyud na sila. However, not all friends are available for aid in times of financial needs. Okay, namsa sila personal nga ila ha, mag dili gyud na sila sahay nga makahatag gyud sila dayon. So such as putting up a business project, no? So for sure, however, most friends and relatives would be around to help or assist a budding entrepreneur for him or her to succeed in a business project. So next is purchase order financing, also called as PO financing. So this scheme can be arranged with commercial banks or financing institutions, no? Standing arrangements can be made with the bank or financing institution whereby for a fee the bank will finance the production requirement of the company and upon delivery of the goods to the buyer, no? Payment will be made by the client directly to the bank or financing institution. So, magpahuwam ni sila kwarta nimo. And dili sila, sila mo yung gasto sa production nga. So sila mo yung gasto sa production nga needed nimo sa imuha. So, after that, kung mubayad na ang buyer, ang purchaser, diha na sad ka mo bayad sa imong gihuman og PO. Of course, igbayad nimo na gina siya ay say fees or charges. So, normal ra siya na siya fees or charges kung mahuwam ka, no? So, next is employees. So, we should never underestimate the employees. Nobody has a greater stake in the health of the company other than the entrepreneur and the employees. So, for corporations now seeking to expand capital base, possibility of having an employee stock option plan should be explored, no? This will not only answer the capital needs of the firm, but it could be also a vehicle for lifelong partnership between capital and labor, and would also reinforce the loyalty of the employees towards the firm. So, nindot yun siyang isop, no? Kay, you will kanang hatagan nimo og percentage sa imuhang company, no, ang imuhang employees nya wala yun ang employees wala ra sila ihatag, but instead ang katong pila ka percentage nga imong gihatag is non-tax to siya, dili siya taxable. So naadyo chance nga ang katong stocks nga maka profit kato palitan 30% is maka profit, dili na siya taxan. So mo increase jud ay imong capital, and also nindot siya kay nga no makanindot sad siya sa inyong bond sa inyong employees, no, sa loyalty inana. So next is users. It may sound as a bad source of financing on account of there being illegal fund sources and charging high financing rates. So users, no, mo ni sila ang mga tao nga magpahuwam sila kwarta pero taas kayo ang interest rate. So normal, kasagaran jud ani niyan mga sari-sari store, mga mag-start up og mga sari-sari store. Mo ni siya kasagaran nila mahuwaman. Atagan ka largo sa kwarta, dali ra kayo ang process. Diha dayon manghuwam ka pero taas kayo ang interest rate, and to the point nga illegal na siya. So mao na siya mga users, but this can also be a one of sources of funds or capital inana. Next is angel investors. So while it is true that entrepreneur's concern is the profit motive for himself, it is also a noble idea to share with others not only the profit aspects but also the risks and burdens of the business. So because of that, entrepreneurs share their startup capital to what we call mga private investors, no? Mo sila gitawag og angel investors. So these are private investors focused on financing small business ventures in exchange for equity. Angel investors could be friends or relatives or private individuals. So the ownership of your business will be divided among investors who contribute capital. There is no obligation placed on you to pay back the amount invested. So dili ka wala kay obligasyon para mo mohatag nilag balik sa kung pila ilang invest sila 1 million, wala kayo obligasyon para bayaran nimo ang ilahang 1 million. So all the investors get is a percentage in the profits of the business and the losses or profits associated with it. So next is we're gonna discuss about the stock market and the IPO or the initial public offering. So entrepreneurship is not only new venture creation as discussed ganina, no? I mean sa mga past few nga discussions, and entrepreneurs also need to expand through innovations. So, saan nila pag-expand if they cannot generate capital from internal sources? So, they should then look for external sources. So, diha na may tabo ang IPO, Initial Public Offering. So, entrepreneurs will sell a portion of their company or stocks to the public. To the public means to the stock market, no? Inana. As a way to generate capital needed to expand. Going public is either an opportunity or a threat. So the best time to go public is when the IPO market are hot. Some will not qualify depending on their industry. So, mo gina siya nga murag threat sad siya. But an IPO, an initial public offering, is also a possible alternative for entrepreneurs who aspires to take the company public. Next is understanding the IPO. So, understanding the initial public offering. Dealing with initial public offering means going through the stock market system under the backing of stocks, the Philippine Stocks Exchange. If contemplating a public offering, if ganahan na ang usa ka entrepreneur, if ganahan siya mag-explore into public offering, so they also need to understand the basic nature and peculiarities of the new issues market. So these are three facts that need to be understood. So the first is new stock offering tend to be underpriced relative to their trading price. So mas gamay gyud siya og price. So mas gamay jud kag makuha nga capital. So timing is important when taking the firm public because there are periods of high average returns and high volume known as hot issue. So that is why gamit jud siya ang timing. The third one is new issues tend to underperform for up to 5 years after the offering. So 5 years underperform. In short, the IPO market has its own personality. So medyo complicated yun ang IPO market because IPO market has somewhat its own personality and acts a bit different. So this is a fact that needs to be understood by an entrepreneur wanting to take a firm public.
Hello everyone, good day. I am Aliana May and Magallanes and I will do the continuation of our lesson 8, starting with the IPO process. So making the company public via the initial public offering follows administrative processes. So as shown in the slide, the following is a brief but factual description of this process. The entire process can take as little as 6 months to complete, but some companies take 18 months or longer to go public because in some cases, where the corporate structure is poorly organized and additional financing is required to position the company for a more beneficial public offering, the process can take 2 years. During that time, a minimum of one and preferably Two or more officers of the corporation will spend much of their time interfacing with attorneys, auditors, underwriters, and financial printers, collecting information for the reams of the documentation that need to be submitted. As the effective dates approaches, roadshows as a means of showing off the company and improving the potential price performance in the aftermarket will have to be prepared and executed, meaning the CEO will spend a fair amount of time making the presentations to brokers and institutional investors. Slideshows, product brochures, and possibly videos will have to be produced and distributed. Trips must be planned to make the presentation nationally and quite possibly internationally. So next slide will show you the last of the IPO process, and that is that during this process, the firm's owner and managers will be answering questions such as what do we need to do before going public? What are the legal requirements? Who should be responsible for the different activities and how? Should we structure our team to make it all happen? How do we choose an investment banker? How do we determine the appropriate price for the offering? And lastly, how will life be different after we are a public company? Although the preceding description cannot be faulted for being factually inaccurate, it does not capture the essence of the journey. Taking a company public is one of the most exhilarating, frustrating, stimulating, and exhausting experiences owners and managers will ever encounter. They are exposing themselves to the vicissitudes of the capital markets and the world of investment bankers, which few entrepreneurs understand, much less appreciate. So, the cost of the process seems excessive and exorbitant. Most times, the owners find themselves having little influence in the decisions being made, which becomes most disconcerting to them. Disillusionment with the investment bankers and with much of the entire process itself may develop for the company's owners. At some point, the owners may wonder where they lost control of the process. And although it may be of little comfort, these feelings are not unique but are shared by many who have participated in a public offering. The IPO begins with an entrepreneur's decision to go public and take the plunge in IPO. The entrepreneur then selects an investment banker to serve as underwriter, who in turn brings together a group of investment house to help sell the shares. With the help of the underwriter and the host of other experts, the entrepreneur prepares a prospectus, the legal document gonna use to satisfy the Securities and Exchange Commission, or in other words, the SEC, that he is telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth to prospective investors. The managers, along with the investment bankers, go on the road to tell the firm story to the brokers who will be selling the stock. The day before the offering is released to the public, a decision is made as to actual offering price. To this point, any discussion of the price of the stock has been tentative. Then all the work, which by now has been months, comes to fruition in a single event offering the stock to the public via the stock exchange and waiting for the results consequence. Dealing with investment bankers, an entrepreneur or business organization undertaking fund generation via the initial public offering or through the stock market cannot simply do it by himself or the company staff. In addition to the issue of who controls the events and decisions in the IPO process, one other matter is important. Whenever you are negotiating, it is always good to know the underlying motivation for the other side. In this case, you need to understand the investment banker's incentives for assisting with an IPO. For instance, who is the investment banker's primary customer here? Clearly, the issuing firm is rewarding the underwriter for the services performed through the fees paid and a participation in the deal. But the economics for helping with an IPO is not as rewarding as other activities performed by investment bankers, such as their involvement with corporate acquisitions. The banker is also selling other securities to the customers on the other end of the trade. Some would argue that herein lies the reason why IPOs are underpriced. Is this being done to benefit their customer buying the stock? This debate will not be resolved soon, but regardless of its outcome, unless you understand how the investment banker and others in the process are compensated, your expectations as to what they will do for your firm may be grossly exaggerated. Going public via the IPO means accommodating new business owners or partners the entrepreneur has never known before. Some could be friendly while others could be hostile, even armed with a hidden agenda to take over the management or control the company. Once the firm has been sold, taken public, or merged with a larger corporation as part of a strategic alliance, and once the money or stock has changed hands, the entrepreneur is a free person. No longer are there concerns in losing market share, being sued, or not being able to service the firm's debt. The unending and at times chaotic schedule is at last put in order. The entrepreneur has the financial means to do essentially what he wants to do when he wants to do it. The entrepreneur can begin relentlessly working to improve one's favorite sports or spend a lot more time at the lake enjoying his favorite pastime. The risk in going public. So, in going public, there are two disappointments frequently mentioned by entrepreneurs who have sold their companies by going public, and here it is as follows. So, first is that the entrepreneur may lose some focus and direction in life, focus that has been provided by owning a company. Even for those with a basic value system that reminds them that they are not their work, there is a real chance of some emotional downtime. Some wish they had never sold their company, even though they had received what was to them a fair price. They came to realize that the firm served as the base for much of what they did, both in and out of the business area. In addition to that, another risk in going public is managing the liquidity resulting from the company sale becomes a burden for some. They find that managing money is more difficult and less enjoyable than they had expected, and less rewarding than operating their own company.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today I will be tackling about borrowing from the bank. The bank is has to exist to lend money, but it is up for entrepreneurs. Um, the bank has always been there to help the entrepreneurs in making capitals, lending money, and everything. But it is not a mandatory thing to borrow from the bank, but it is a decision from entrepreneurs to borrow. Next, be careful. This is the reminder for all entrepreneurs borrowing from the bank. Banks may deceive you. It can be make the life of entrepreneurs miserable. The bank is a friend or a foe, and also a foe. If you borrow from a bank, it has um, qualities, requirements also, and you should always research what kind of bank you will borrow from. The entrepreneur's background and character will have a direct bearing on how your loan application is treated. This is the things that you should do in order to your loan to be accepted. First is to ready and prepared to the questions that the bank may pose. You should prepare yourself about the questions and interviews that the bank may propose to you in order to accept your application. Next is this is the questions. How much you really want. In order to continue, how much you really want, be sure to support your figures with a business plan. In this very first step, this already explains why you need a business plan. How can you have a business if you don't have a plan or a business plan? Next is what are you going to do with the money? This is to make sure that you are going to use the money for business, not for your personal needs, not for your leisure, and fun. This explains exactly in detail how you spend your money. Do this with your business plan. So, business plan is a must. Next, why is the loan needed for the business? Why do you really need the loan if you have another sources? Be prepared with specific reasons, such as you don't have enough funds, you don't have any source resources that will support your business. As why you need to borrow money and convince also the banker that you indeed need their support. Next is, why do you need our depositors' money? Explain to the banker why the bank finances financing is critical to your business and why you did not consider other fund sources. In this part, you will explain to the banker why you chose the bank or the depositor's money to fund your business. Next is, when will you pay back the loan? This means that in your business plan, in financial portion, propose a loan payment schedule that will please your financer, including the bank. The bank somehow um, has a two face decision if you if you pay your loan sooner or later. Next is, how will you repay the loan? This will convince, or just to make sure for the bank's part, that you will pay the loan. In what way? Convince the banker the profitability for your business venture, and convince the banker as how you would repay the loan. What happens if your plan do not work out? This is to have a backup plan in order if your business failed to pay the loan. Assure the bank that should the worst happen, there are other guarantees and terms in the loan contract that sufficiently covers whatever loan exposure here will be. So here we will find what are the C's of credit. The first C is the collateral. This is the entrepreneur's guarantee. Next is the capacity. The capacity of the entrepreneur to pay the loan, on how on how smoothly the entrepreneur has to pay the loan. Next is the character, the personality standing of the entrepreneur. If the entrepreneur is very hardworking for the business, or just um, leaving everything to the bank. Next is the contract. This is the agreement of the contracting parties. This is where your agreement is stated. Next is the condition. This is the content of your contract, or what are the things that you agree when you pay, how much you will loan, or what will you do if your business fail. Unusing someone else's money as the your capital. Next is various authors and financing new ventures, suggest exploring external fan sources. Um, in this way, if the bank cannot really give you that application, they will suggest to explore external fan sources.